Hi everyone. So today we'll do Judges chapter 4, a bit of 5, but mainly chapter 4. And before we go in there, I just want to pose a question to you. So, what happens? How do you deal? What is your behavior when the morale is down, when the situation is really bleak, especially in the context within church and youth group and your wider church community? So what should your behavior be when everything seems so bleak, you feel defeated? Yeah, what is your attitude? What should it be like? Ask yourself, what is my attitude? How do I interact with other people when everything seems so bleak? What is your attitude? Is it just negativity? So we're going to look at chapter 4. And so chapter 4 is after when we heard the story of Gideon. So chapter 4, 5 is pretty much about the prophet Deborah. And so we'll touch on that. And so those just park those questions. What type of behavior should you have, and what does Jesus teach us? Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, in chapter 4 and 5, so 5 is pretty much just the poem, the song of what's happened with the narrative in chapter 4. So in chapter 4, if you read with me, so for 20 years, that's like half of my entire lifetime, so which is a long time. So for 20 years, the Israelites, they've been suffered. They've lived in misery and pain and fear, right? Under the oppression of the Canaanites, under the king Jabin. So for 20 years, that's just their reality. They feel so defeated. There's no, the morality is like non-existent, okay? And so God appears to the prophetess Deborah. Now, she's the only female judge, but she does a fantastic job as we come to learn. So God comes to her. So she's a prophetess, and now she's judging the nation under a palm tree, which is in her name, Deborah, the palm Deborah, pretty cool. So has her own name after her. And then God's word comes to her, and so she asks for and summons Barak. He's apparently the military leader, the commander. And so she tells him, if you read with me, I think verse 6, she goes, so she sent for Barak, and she goes to him, hey, Barak, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun and lead the way to Mount Tabor. I will lure Sisera, which is the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariot and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands. Now, pay attention to this. Now, this is how he replies. This is Barak. Barak said to him, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. So again, conditional obedience, or in this case, disobedience. So remember how we touch on that conditional aspect of a relationship with God? That God, if you do this to me, then I will do that. It's conditional. Imagine that. Imagine your relationship is built on conditional love. That is a terrible relationship. That's a pretty toxic relationship to be in. That love is conditional. It's based on what you do, based on your performance. So you don't want to be in that type of relationship. So, and certainly, God is not like that for us, right? His love for us is unconditional, not conditional. And so likewise, reciprocate that relationship is God, I love you, regardless. Right? If you do this for me, if you do or you don't, I love you nonetheless. Okay. So it's not based on conditional. It's not based on those bargaining and deal making with God. That's a pretty toxic kind of relationship. Okay. So anyway, Deborah sends him, but then he goes, look, I'll go with you guys. So what is evident here is his lack of faith in God. So God in Barak's life is pretty much non-existent. His faithful God is non-existent. So the morality of the men who's supposed to lead and fight for the nation, they are living in fear and cowardice and lack of faith. And it takes, God has raised a woman, okay, a woman to spur on the people, the men who've lost their way, who's lost their faith, who's lost their will to fight and believe in God. So they've lost all that, and now God has raised a female leader. Okay, and so she goes, okay, I'll go with you. Okay, and so they go to set their troops on Mount Tabor. And it's funny, if you're looking from a strategic kind of military perspective, it doesn't seem very smart. Okay, so if you go on Mount Tabor, now actually, Mount Tabor is actually a real place in Israel. It's located, I think, in Galilee. And so if you look at it, you Google it, you'll see it. It's a big kind of like round mound. It's like a big, massive hill. Okay, and it's just kind of plains at the foot. Anyway, so their plan was God says, okay, just go there. Okay, go there, put your army there, 10,000 men, and And then when you go there, then I will defeat. God says, I'll defeat the Canaanites. Okay, all of them. Now, another thing. Do you know why the Israelites are so afraid of the Canaanites? Because they have not one, not 20, they've got 900 chariots. Now, if you read, it's not any normal chariots. These are heavily decked out, upgraded, fully iron-plated chariots, okay? It's like equivalent of our super tanks right now. You know, our A1 Abrams, our Leopard 2s, our Challenger tanks, you know. It's a heavy machinery, okay, that just wreaks havoc and fear on your enemies, okay? That's the type of weaponry the Canaanites have. And so, of course the Israelites will be afraid. Okay, and so you can't understand where they're coming from. So their morality, nothing, non-existent, no morality. All the courage is gone in the camp in Israelites, and so God raises Deborah, and this is what they do. Okay, and so Barak agrees to go with Deborah because she's agreed to go with him. If you read, and so they go off, and then when Sisera's commander of Jabin's army hears this, he goes, okay. I don't know what they're doing. It's a really bad strategy, but we've got them. So he sends all his troops and all the 900 chariots. And so if you look at strategically, if you look at the plane, he thinks that, okay, if they're up there, camping there, they're going to come down, okay? You're going to run out supplies, run out food and water. You're going to come down eventually. When you come down, you're weakened. And so there's no chance of down there. His chariots will run circles around them. They'll in hours, they'll be gone, okay? So Sisera thinking, oh, this is easy pickings, right? And so they'll be defeated easily. But what happens if you read on? So they go there. They sit there, and so when Sisera hears the Israelites are camped at Mount Tabor, he goes, okay, we've got them. So he sets out and thinking, we're going to defeat them. But what happens? And so when Sisera's army gets there, then Deborah calls on Barak, okay, now's the time. And then if you read, somehow they defeat the army. They destroy them all the way to the Kidron River. Okay, they massacre the Canaanites and their supposedly 900 heavily armed chariots. They destroy, they win. They actually win. You know, these people that came from out of nowhere, they've been weakened, their morality is non-existent, probably their forces are depleted, but they win the battle. Okay, somehow, miraculous ways, they won. They were, from a strategic standpoint, they had no chance. You know, but they won. And so they win, and then they drive out, they rout the whole army, they massacre everyone, and then Sisera, who flees the fight, okay, so he turns out to be a coward, and so he flees, and then he goes to, her name is Jael, Jael, and so she calls him in, maybe lures him in, we're not too sure. And then while he's sleeping, he comes in and she hides him. And while he sleeps, she kills him. And so the glory doesn't go to Barak. It doesn't. So it goes to Jael. And as Deborah prophesied that the glory won't be yours. So it goes to Jael. If you see it throughout, the narrative is like Deborah, the protagonist, the female protagonist who God raised to lead the people of Israel against their oppressors, against those who've caused so much pain and suffering, against an army that heavily outnumbers them, heavily would defeat them, right? But they defeated that army. And that power and that source comes from God. She believed in God. Her faith in God was strong. That trust there was strong. Unlike the men, Barak, the military leader, who's supposed to rally the nation, but he didn't. So God raised a female leader. And if you notice something here, you know the Christian opposed at the start? You know, what's your attitude like when everything seems so bleak, when your team morale at church, your youth group or wherever, and you think that, oh, it's not going to work. What is your behavior like? What's your attitude like? See, what we learn, the takeaway lesson from this, from Deborah, is that her attitude is not of condemnation, but of encouragement, of building up, of spurring on, of saying to Barak, you can do this. You know, she doesn't set high and lofty standards, say, oh, you don't meet my so-called, faith expectation. You've lost your faith. Instead of condemning and belittling him, she builds him up. She's able to open up and he's able to live out his optimum potential because of Deborah. She built him up. She encouraged him. She enabled him. And so that's a lesson for us today, is that as brothers and sisters, instead of tearing one another down, instead of judging and being negative and whinging and whining and being really toxic and unloving, instead of that, we're called. Jesus teaches us to love one another and build each other up, spur each other on, encourage each other, even though the forecast, even though everything seems so bleak and negative and everything's going to be a failure, even then God says love each other. And we see from this type of attitude, it's a really good leadership trait as well. Like instead of tearing people down, you build them up so they can live out their potential, so they can be the best that they can. Right? So the lesson for us today from Deborah is that be like that. Instead of being negative and critical of each other, we should love each other and see more of what we're able to do and build each other up. Instead of gossiping and saying bad things and negative things, no, we have to encourage each other. Like in Thessalonians, it says this, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11. It says, therefore, encourage one another and build each other up. We have to do that. This is God's teachings to us, to love each other and build each other up. And there's another passage that says, love covers a multitude of sin. It sees the positive sides, and it amplifies it, it emphasizes that. When you really love someone, you want to see the best out of them. And you tend to see just the best things about them. So likewise, same thing. When you really love each other, it's not just saying it, it's not just a thought, but it's a reality that you really truly love each other, that you want the best for each other, and you build each other up to be the best that we can. See, that's love. And we call to that. And sometimes in times of hardship, when things doesn't seem too good, the best thing we should do is love and encourage each other. And so that's one main lesson that we really learn from Deborah. And the other part is God. See, God works. That if you say so, it's going to happen. Right? You got to just trust and believe in him, even though it seems so bleak. So in Israel's case, it's so bleak that God, where are you? We're suffering here. Is there a God? Do you really love us? Look at us. We're living in misery and pain. Right? Where are you, God? And the lesson here, guys, trust in God no matter what. He will come through. He will deliver you as he delivered his people, because he loves you so much. Right? So trust in him. And in those times of hardship, in those times that everything seems so bleak, build each other up. Love one another. Okay? So that's a lesson today. Keep loving each other and live in that reality and in that power. And continue loving each other as Jesus commands. Peace, and have a good weekend. Cheers. Blessing.